been an exceptional year for our lectures and our preaching and worship and everything. And we guarantee you that come the fall of 2015, we will admit our first class that will not pay a cent of tuition. Now, since we have made that known, we have gotten lots of responses. One of the first responses was from somebody at another school who said, "Are you crazy?" And we said, "Well, no, we're not. We know we can't solve every problem in our church today. We can't. But we could do this." But among the responses we've gotten a number of people who will say to us that this is courageous, that this will make a real difference. But I want to tell you the best response I have been told yet. The Covenant for the Future makes me proud to be an alum of Louisville Seminary. That's the best response we could hope for. Together, I am convinced that we can do this. We are 90% of the way to doing away with tuition. We just have 10% more, a couple of $1 million. That's it. And we're there. We can do this. We will do this, and we have to do this, but we cannot do this without your help. That's the fact. And so I want to ask you, as alums of Louisville Seminary, if you believe in what we are doing, then please help us even more. First, by contributing to the annual fund, because it is essential. Upon coming here, one of the first things we realized is we have been setting our sights too low in annual fund. And a seminary with the size budget that we have cannot get by with $675,000, $700,000 a year in annual fund. And last year, we raised over $1.1 million in annual fund. We need to keep doing that, and we will. We need for every one of us to make a generous gift to the campaign, the Covenant for the Future campaign. Because what we're doing is making sure these scholarships are endowed. In our history, we have received some wonderful gifts of scholarships. Wonderful gifts of scholarships that were funded every year by people who really believe in what we're doing. People who would give us $20,000 a year for student scholarships, specifically named scholarships. And when those people went away, passed away often, the scholarships went away too. And so people would say, "Well, where'd that scholarship go? It was a great scholarship. We had it for years." It wasn't endowed. What we've got to make sure of is that we endow them. And I'll tell you something else that we have made a commitment to doing. We'll be announcing this to the Board of Trustees. Every cent raised for the Covenant for the Future will be unitized, set apart, and will never have more than a draw of 5.5% on those dollars. So these scholarships will not go away. There's one more thing. We need you to join the Caldwell Society, our planned giving association of this school. Every member of our Board of Trustees is committed to being a member of the Caldwell Society. Transformative gifts to theological schools overwhelmingly are gifts that are left to the seminary in someone's will or in an insurance policy. Now that's easy to figure out. In universities get multi-million-dollar gifts all the time. Seminaries don't. The transformative gifts to seminaries come over and over again through wills, estates, insurance policies. That's how they come to us. Now, why? Well, I remember something David Stitt said years ago. David Stitt was a past president of Louisville Seminary. He said, you know, there are two institutions in our society that you just can't count on alums being able to give a lot. One is seminaries and the other is penitentiaries. The fact is, most of us will never have the means in our lives to give transformative gifts to theological schools. But the difference every one of us can make in the schools we love, the churches we love, the charities that we love, the great difference every one of us can make is in our estates. And I want to ask you to do those three things. Your seminary is proud of you, and we are honored that you're proud of what we're doing. I'm sorry. I've been doing theological education for 20 years. And I have seen plans come and go. I've seen money raised for signs. I've seen money raised for faculty chairs. That matters. But I've never seen us raise money that mattered more. This will make a difference in our churches because our graduates will be able to go out to places that need them desperately and can't afford them. This will liberate our graduates from the burden of an average of $30,000 each in debt that they're carrying into their ministries. This will matter. And speaking of our alums, tonight we have a wonderful and special opportunity to honor people who have been serving in ministry and who have not only distinguished themselves, but have distinguished the church and have distinguished their seminary because of it. When our Alumni Association evaluates who should be given a Distinguished Alum Award, they're asking themselves who has made a lasting difference, who has made a lasting impact on the church and on society through, quote, outstanding professional, volunteer, or philanthropic accomplishments, and who have advanced the seminary's mission and our impact on the church and future generations. In 2012, the seminary established a First Decade Award, which is presented to a recent graduate who has made a significant impact on the church and in his or her community in the first 5 to 9 years of their ministry and service. Tonight's award recipients share a profound sense of discipleship and service. And we could say that for everyone who has won these awards. I've watched them over the years. We are aware of what motivates them. And we know that one of the things that motivates them is to make our world a better place. Their dedication to ministry inspires us. We're going to begin our presentations this evening with our newest award, our First Decade Award. And to introduce our First Decade Award recipient, I would like to invite Reverend Dr. Kylan Gray, our Dean of Students, to the podium. Kylan.
It is indeed my delight and my privilege and joy to bring to you and to talk to you about someone, a topic that's very easy for me to talk about. And it is a conversation that comes out of the spirit of collegiality and friendship. Reverend Dr. Louis Brogdon is the 2014 First Decade Award recipient. I give you to the writing that is in the program to get the official description and bio, a short bio that describes why he is well more than worthy of this designation. I stand here to encourage you beyond the writing that's in the program. The real imprint and impact of one's life work is in interactions. You read the bio, but you get the genuineness that the bio just doesn't do justice to the person and the quality of the individual that he is until you experience real life. His scholarship is stellar. His passion for the church is genuine and real. He is an academic who loves the church. He is not a researcher who is continually trying to blow holes in any person's confidence in congregational life. He is one who will speak truth, but he speaks that truth not from someone who is antagonistic to congregational life, but one who deeply and passionately loves the church. And I just had the blessing of learning that firsthand, because for the past 6 years, my service as the Dean of Students of Louisville Seminary, I've had the privilege of working side by side with Louis. And I can stand before you and tell you that there is a lot of substance behind the letters. His heart bleeds over in everything that he does. So you get to really see the quality of his heart, his passion for the African American church and for the church at large. In coffee conversations, we've had plenty of those. In meetings where we've served together, and the intelligence and the ideas and the fresh wind of vision that he shares in those meetings shows what the bio tries to get at. In classrooms, I've not only have been a visitor for his classes, but I've been a student in his classes. And they have been some of the most exciting and engaging and challenging exercises of education and learning that I've experienced. But I've learned most about him when I watch him around his family. I see him with his children, and all of them, they're here. His children and his wife is with him today. When you see him with his family, for me, that says a whole lot about where the brunt of his passion for God, his passion for the church, and his academics lie. Finally, you get to learn a lot about anybody when you eat some bread with him. And he is my Popeye's chicken buddy. Popeye's chicken is better than good wine. You hear what I'm saying? It is in those many times that we've had breaks where we've gone away to just share. That's where we share not only the work that we share together, but we share life and love for God. He is a brother, true friend. I commend you to the books that he has written. Those books will let you know why he is the worthy recipient of the 2014 First Decade Award recipient. He's an academic, he's a scholar, he's a pastor, he is a worshiper, he's a lover of people. He is an alum of Louisville Seminary. I introduce to you the Reverend Dr. Louis Bo Brogdon.
Thank you.
I just want to briefly say that first, I give honor to God who has made this day possible in my life, and to scripture that I live with all the time in Ephesians 3:20. It says, "Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we could ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." And God has taken this kid from a very small place in West Virginia and has done incredible things in my life. And I'm deeply, deeply thankful for what God has done. Deeply thankful for the people God has placed around me, because without people in your life, without iron sharpening iron, this day would not be possible. So great parents, family, and friends, and colleagues have meant the world. And I also want to lastly say how much I appreciate Louisville Seminary, and seeing a poster of Louisville Seminary in the religion department in my undergrad school. I came here on a whim, not knowing anything about this school. It's nothing but the providence of God. And God has used this school to bless, to enrich, and to transform not only my life, but the lives of so many that God has given me the opportunity to touch. And so the legacy of Louisville Seminary will live on through the Black Church Studies programs, but also through the many African American churches and every venue God gives me an opportunity to be present in. I want to thank the Alum Board and all those who considered me and elected me for this auspicious award. Thank you.
Distinguished Alum Awards. Introducing our first Distinguished Alum Award recipient this evening is the Reverend Dr. Marion McClure Taylor.
When I was director of Worldwide Ministries Division, I would occasionally hear about a woman named Kathy Angie. And I remember distinctly the respect that I had, but more than that, the kind of gratitude when I would hear the kinds of things that she was involved in. And they're the kinds of things that most of us don't get a chance, the hurts in the world that we don't have a chance to go and address on our own, but we're so grateful and relieved to know that someone's doing it on our behalf. And then later it was Kathy and Joe, her husband, as their mission service appointments evolved. So it is a real thrill for me to introduce Kathy Angie, full name Kathleen Andrus Angie, better known as Kathy, and to say that my respect has turned into awe as I've read and learned more about her and her life. A cornerstone of her preparation has been social work training. Having earned a master's degree in 1983 from the University of Michigan, and having served as a therapist from 83 to 99 in a variety of practice and institutional settings in Michigan and Ohio. Then she connected with Presbyterian Disaster Assistance and began to work in Croatia and Bosnia, training local teachers and pastors and social workers and parents to help children who were traumatized by war. In '99, she worked in Albania, helping to receive Kosovo refugees. Susan Ryan, who was the coordinator of Presbyterian Disaster Assistance during much of that time, tells me that Kathy's respect for the spiritual needs of refugees in Albania led Kathy to create a one-room worship center. But out of respect for the different religious groups that were present, she allowed each one to decorate one wall of this one-room worship center with images that would help represent what was sacred to them. And then during worship, they could face their wall. What a lovely way to deal with a complicated situation with respect. During this chapter of her life, then, she began studies at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary and graduated with the Master's of Divinity degree in 2001. And there's a kind of remarkable story there, too, because she called to inquire what would be involved in doing theological studies. And 9 days later, she was admitted, had a scholarship, and was in class. I don't know if this is more about the seminary or about her, but it was remarkable. She gets things done. In June of 2001, the General Assembly of the PCUSA commissioned the Reverend Kathleen Andrus Angie and Joseph Angie to serve the church in Budapest, Hungary. There, they partnered with the Reformed Church in Hungary and worked to develop a ministry that had never existed there before, a refugee ministry, involving people from local congregations in ministry to refugees, partnering with other service providers, supporting the spiritual and the community life of people who had lost their homelands. During that period, she co-wrote a facilitator's guide for community-based psychosocial care that is still used by aid workers around the world who collaborate through an organization called ACT that we all need to know about and support, Action by Churches Together. And you've got a handout with you that shows you just a sampling of what that's about. That's the collaboration that led to some additional work that continues today, now still 3 years after ending her full-time co-worker appointment with the denomination in 2001. Did I get that right, 2001? I think that's right. She now serves as a master trainer for ACT Alliance member organizations. The Church of Sweden contracts with her to work for member organizations who've requested assistance. She trains pastors, NGO workers, church workers in this model of community-based, holistic support for the mental health, the social and the spiritual needs of people who have been through a crisis within their own cultural context. And her development of training materials now extends to materials for interfaith religious leaders so that they can all be equipped to support the needs of the within their local communities when they're dealing with crises. She was ordained to the ministry of Word and Sacrament at College Hill Presbyterian Church in Cincinnati, where Jo is also a member, and she's a member of the Presbytery of Cincinnati. Both Jo and Kathy have been involved in mission at their church. They've taught Sunday school, taken on other leadership roles, and if you're not exhausted yet, let me tell you this, they have 6 children. Tina, Kane, Elizabeth, Joseph, Adam, and Brett, and 9 grandchildren. I'll tell you what, when I asked where my grandmother was, the answer was never Kenya or Kosovo. So please join me in applauding and listening to Kathy Angie.
I feel overwhelmed by listening to all of that. Sometimes you don't think about it when you're doing it. Thank you so much for this honor. It was truly unexpected. I do my work, I work in different countries, I have a network of people that I work with in different churches and different organizations. But I had no idea anybody here at the seminary knew what was going on, because I have to confess I'm a terrible letter writer. So it was really a surprise when I got this letter. My work is to support the work of the church and church-based organizations worldwide, so that God's people in their many cultures and locations, can show compassion for their neighbors where there is need. We work at the community level, empowering the local people, becoming their partners to serve the people around them. We here at Louisville and in the North Atlantic countries have an opportunity to learn good pastoral skills when we study in seminary. This opportunity is not available to most people in the world. People, usually men, but a growing number of women, study or learn the scriptures and are dropped into the real world. Any pastor knows that we walk with people through all of life's transitions: births, deaths, marriages, crises of all sorts. They're both happy and they're tragic. We also walk with people through the unanticipated tragedies of a hurricane, wars, famines. In the Philippines just 4 months ago, when the big hurricane hit, it was the church leaders who were in the communities with the people when the water was rising. And it was the church leaders who were still in the community when the water went back down. They were there before the army, before the aid workers, before anybody. And those are the people who help their neighbors, empower the members of their congregations to serve the people around them, to comfort them, to help them make meaning out of these crazy, tragic events that happen. This is the body of Christ. The leaders do their best to care for their communities. However, as the Philippine religious leaders have told us, a few tools and skills would come in really handy. In the years since I left here, I've been working with ACT Alliance and its 140 partner organizations to develop, field test, and distribute these basic tools. Marion mentioned the guide that was produced in 2003. That's gone on to become a huge website. We are working right now to update it again, integrating the best information we can find from the professionals in the field, but translating it so it can be understood by somebody who may be speaking English as a second or a third language. All of the website is designed in a way that you can download it, download pages from the website, even if you have dial-up internet connections, or you're sitting in an internet cafe in some dusty town in southern Africa. Through this process of working with so many people in emergencies and development, I can tell you that the church is alive and it's active. God's love is being shared generously. Women and minorities are being raised up. People strive to serve faithfully and with compassion. And much to my amazement, after studying Greek, Hebrew, and exegesis, it is remarkable how close we are in understanding who is God, despite all of the different cultures that we work in and all the different languages we speak. I was in Mozambique a couple of months ago and doing some training for some community workers who work with AIDS patients. And they said, "Mrs. Kathy, we need to do devotions at the beginning of each day." And I said, "Okay, who's going to lead the devotions?" And so some people agreed to lead the music, which of course in Africa is singing and dancing, and some people agreed to lead the scripture study. Well, they did this every single day, and it was excellent. And some of the people who were leading the scripture study, they couldn't read and write, but they had memorized the scripture, and they learned through their own church attendance and so on, and they led our devotions in the morning. And it was so precious, and I tape recorded it on my telephone, the singing and the dancing and the preaching, because I work with a little African-American congregation in Cincinnati, and they were feeling so discouraged. And they didn't have a church musician, and the person who was leading really couldn't carry a tune. And so I brought this video back from Africa of our worship in the mornings, and it was just very special. I want to thank you for this honor. I want to thank God for the many, many ways that God has been active in maneuvering this in my life. And I also want to thank some very important people. I would like to thank my mom, who was active in civil rights from the time I was a very young girl, and taught me that all people are God's people. And I want to thank my Girl Scout leader, because every weekend when we were out camping or something, she would take us to church. Didn't matter what kind of church it was. This was my introduction to ecumenical studies. I want to thank my husband, Joe, who loves me on my good days and when my head is in the computer, and when I'm at home or off in some faraway country. I want to thank Susan Ryan, my friend and mentor, who found me when I was working in Croatia, and she believed in the psychosocial support that we were doing with children and church leaders, and fought to get this work started. I want to thank my friend Tesfaye Skoglund, who was the person assigned to work with me when I was in Kosovo back in 1999, before I came to seminary. We looked around and we saw some really bad quality work. And Tesfaye was busy training deacons in Sweden at the time. He said, we have to do something about this. We cannot let the church be represented by bad quality work. We have to write. We have to write a training manual. And so I said, I can't write. And he said, your English is better than mine. And so we started to write. And here we are today. And I want to thank also my friends at the Church of Sweden, who have continued to fight to keep this issue front and center, to find ways for us to be the church in a way that is highly respected by the international mental health community, the World Health Organization, the UN. They came to us and said, would you help us write some material about how to work with religious leaders in emergencies? Because they trust us. So thank all of you, and let's celebrate God together.
And now I would like to invite the Reverend Dr. Mark Goodman Morris to the podium to introduce our next Distinguished Alum recipient. Mark.
I love this evening. My heart's like right here. We're going to get a seminary where the president starts off by crying, and then you hear these killer witnesses to where God's working in the world. This is just wonderful. I need to start off by saying that Louis Donaldson told me just to make it all up tonight. So I'm going to start this. I'm not making this up. I called him last year to talk about this, and you need to know that he is a reluctant recipient of the Distinguished Alum Award. It's not that he didn't want the honor, but his advice to me was, please subtly undermine me to the committee. What he said was, pastors are doing the frontline work, and they don't get much recognition, so they should be getting this honor. So as we talked, I realized that was part introversion, but it was mostly this kind of holy humility. And as soon as I got off the phone, I knew that I would be advocating for you to be here tonight. Where's Lynn?
She went to the bathroom.
So I'll tell you a story about Lynn while she's gone. So the reason that Louis made it here tonight is because he went home and told her about this possibility, and he said, I really don't want this. And she said something like, and these are kind of your words from last year, "Are you crazy?" And then she said, "This isn't about you, Louis. It's about the community that helped you in your direction and equipped you to become the person you are. Of course you have to accept this award." So I wish he was here. Thank God for discerning and truth-telling spouses wherever you are. There are some of the pieces are in the piece in front of you, but let me just kind of run through this, pieces of the story. Louis, last week when we talked, said, it seems like the older I get, I have less of a narrative. And he said, maybe that'll come back later, but here are some of the pieces. Louis did his undergraduate work at Duke, and it wasn't a great experience, you said. You said that you took a year off college, and when he came here to LPTS, he was ready to invest in his own life. She got me started now. And he said that LPTS was there as a crossroads for him. And at this place, he was affirmed by folks at a key moment in his life. And that's where his gifts began to emerge. He went on, after graduating from here, on to University of Chicago to do his PhD work. Did a stint as a pastor of Holy Grove Presbyterian Church in Holy Grove, Arkansas. Holly Grove. I actually have that. It does sound good. And Dr. Donaldson joined the faculty of Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 1983, where he continues to grow and flourish. I gave thanks for you while you were gone. His primary teaching interests include New Testament, Greek, Greco-Roman culture, and early Christian history. He is the author of 5 books, and some of those are listed there. He's currently working on a book about messianic dynamics in the Gospels, and when I asked him more about that, he said, not on the phone. And I think he also knew that I wouldn't understand a word of what he was saying, but Louis is the editor of Horizons in Biblical Theology, the academic journal from Austin Seminary. And we know all that. You can get all that stuff online. But his greatest impact and his greatest love has been the care, feeding, nurturing, and development of generations of pastors who are faithfully leading our church today. He's happily married to Lynn for 30 years. He has a son, James, a daughter, Sarah, and they all live close by. And he lovingly claims 2 granddaughters. So when we talked on the phone, both times we talked recently, and last year, he is a self-proclaimed old guy at Austin Seminary, which makes me an old guy too, since we both graduated the same year, 1976, from LPTS. When we talked on the phone, we did a little remembering about those years, and in that call, we remembered in particular A.B. Rhodes, and we talked about George Edwards, who himself was a distinguished alum at one dinner some years ago. We talked about how those 2 men loved Scripture and the journey of God so much that they couldn't stop writing about it or reading about it, and mostly talking about it to other people who love the faith. It was what they did and what they loved. And in a flash, I realized that you were just an old guy at Austin. You were the old guy. You are in that same line as A.B. and George were old guys when we were here. You are everyone's dad, and I'm talking to you, Lynn. You're like the parents. You're the one who they tell stories about when they have reunions in Austin. You are one they listen to because you listen in return and because you are listening closely to the movement of God in all that you do. Reflecting on your own life, Louis said he loves the classroom, he adores his students and the way they are in the world, and he says, I love it as much and more than ever, and he still loves his discipline. And then we had this little part of the conversation where one of those kind of magic mystery thing happens, and you said something like, something happens in the classroom, and it calls me beyond what I can be. Last thing, I wrote this down. Everybody gathered here, can name teacher, mentors who make a difference in the way we live our lives. They're the ones who challenged us in new ways of thinking, being, and acting, who were passionate about the faith and invited us to a journey into the depths and mystery of grace with humor and conviction. Louis, you are one of those teacher mentors, and we honor you this evening. Would you welcome Louis to the podium?
So the way I remember my conversation with Lynn was, I get this kind of profound, humble, reason for not accepting this award, and she listened for a while, and she said, "Oh, would you grow up?" And she knows, I'm the typical husband. I only grow up in those rare moments when I have to. I want you to know I'm very proud of this seminary. It's a place full of blessings and of gifted people. I looked over the list of recipients for this award, and do it sometimes. It's an amazing list. Many of these people are my friends, and many more I wish were. And as I looked at the list, I kept thinking of so many other people who should and could be on this list. They're just all these people out there carrying the various blessings of this seminary with them. I'm very proud of this place. I want to give two thanks. I'm not going to thank my wife, who deserves all the credit. I want to just thank two thanks to the seminary. And here's the first one. When I wandered in here, as Mark said, somewhere, I think about 1973, something like that, I was clueless about seminary, about myself, about ministry. And this place held me and began to speak to me. After a year or so, some faculty began to say, Louis, you might think about academics, about being a teacher. It says, I think, a lot about the kind of place this is. One, that the faculty was thinking about students. And two, that they had the arrogance to tell me who I am. But the truth is, I don't think I could have told myself this. I could not have known that I could do this. I think it was kind of a classic Presbyterian call story, where we are named by the community. Actually, I think we might keep doing this. For the people here in this place and the people elsewhere, we might keep trying to offer people good stories about themselves. They can say no, but they might recognize themselves and say yes. And so I just want to say thank you for telling me who I am. Second, this one's trickier. I credit and blame the seminary for making me fall in love with the classroom. This can actually be a problem. As Michael Jenkins will tell you, when accreditation committees arrive on campus, I am not permitted to speak to them. One time, Michael actually made me leave town. And, here's the problem. Accreditation committees think that classes should have outcomes. The class is not unto itself. It leads to something else, as though nothing has value on its own. Everything devolves into something else. And plus, you need numbers that you can write down, like 3 or 4 or 22 or something else. That's my best shot at explaining what accreditation is. And they might not phrase it that way, but you can see why I was not allowed. But let me tell you, this is what I think. This is what I think. I think a class is beautiful unto itself. We read Galatians not in order to do something better. We read Galatians together because the act itself is holy. I think the classroom is holy space. I think the sentences of Galatians make it holy. I think every sentence that every student has ever said in every class makes it holy. I think that. We gather and we read and we speak and we think and we wonder sentences about God and love and hope and the beauty of every life in the room. And this is just simply a good thing. It doesn't need a number. And I want to thank Louisville Seminary for pulling me into this, because I have loved every single moment in the classroom.
You see why I both love this guy and I wouldn't allow him on campus when SACS and ATS came. And now I invite our new president of our Alum Association, Terry Epling, to the podium to introduce our third Distinguished Alum Award recipient. Terry.
Our next honoree is well known across the church, not only for his ability to rock a bow tie, but because he is the face and the voice of Presbyterians in Washington. As the director of the Office of Public Witness, he has access to the corridors of power in our nation's capital. Now, I imagine that work is involving a lot of dinners with the president, famous politicians, spreading the Presbyterian ethos, influencing policy with good reformed thinking about poverty and public education and health care and the environment. I imagine that he must attend those dinners and say, "The General Assembly says." And politicians naturally fall in line. In fact, we know if we follow the news of the church and social media feeds from around the church, that our chief lobbyist spends most of his time among us, in the church. As a pastor, preacher, and prophet, he embodies the conviction that when the General Assembly adopts a policy statement, it speaks to the church, not simply for the church. You will find him preaching, teaching, and praying to and with Presbyterians, organizing and mobilizing us to influence Washington. Because politicians do one thing well: count votes. And General Assemblies don't vote, but thank God Presbyterians do. Tonight we honor our chief community organizer, and we, the church, are his community. The church and the nation are blessed to have this Louisville alumnus encouraging our public witness to the power of the gospel to transform our culture. Let us welcome, from the class of 2002, the Reverend Dr. J. Herbert Nelson II.
First, let me say thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and this honor. It has been quite a journey. Terry Newland, and I stayed up until about 1 o'clock last night. I'm glad he got on the bus this morning. And thank you, Terry, for your nomination and also for the opportunity to be here, and for President Jenkins. I thank you very much, and for all of the alumni of this institution. The first night that I came on this campus, it was in the dark. I'd never been to Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And even then, I could see that it was a beautiful campus. It was a campus to spend the next few years growing and developing. As Katherine Johnson challenged me to think more theologically in the work that I was doing with regards not only to the D-men, but in the pastorates that I was serving. Bill McAtee, with his kind of Mississippi twang, continued to push very hard on the practical aspects of theology and what it meant to be a pastor, and particularly in a transition from an affluent congregation in Greensboro, North Carolina, to really going to the ghetto in Memphis, Tennessee, and starting a church that was designed to evangelize the poor to the Presbyterian Church USA, which sometimes is an oxymoron. But nevertheless, the recognition that in that context, I had to also change my manner, my demeanor, and my expectations for how to proceed. And Dale Andrews, who pushed me on my Doctor of Ministry project with the expectation that I would learn how to contextualize the work of faith that had been done. And all of that, it was the backdrop of pushing to the next level, not simply where I am now, but the level of looking back and remembering, growing up in Orangeburg, South Carolina, to a father who served as state conference president of NAACP during the height of the civil rights movement, who was a Presbyterian pastor, who led students and also led adults and led marches in Orangeburg, South Carolina. The remembrance of 27 African-American students shot in the back by state highway patrolmen when I was a child and watching my dad come home struggling with what it meant to be a Presbyterian pastor, and yet at the same time leading students to try and integrate Harry Floyd's bowling alley in Orangeburg. And so I've really never known the gospel apart from what it really is to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God. I've never really known the gospel of Jesus Christ to be disconnected from a liberating word from those who were stuck at the bottom, the disenfranchised, the oppressed. And yet, I've never known the Presbyterian Church to not preach and teach that gospel, because it was my father, it was my four uncles, it was my grandfather, some of whom were arrested trying to get into white Presbyterian churches on Sunday morning when they left their own pulpits down in South Carolina. But in so doing, I never forgot that there was something redemptive about being a part of this denomination. And I too, in my ministry, on several occasions, have had an opportunity to recognize that yes, even in the midst of struggle and brokenness, even in the midst of intense pain, and in the midst of sense of betrayal from time to time, that there is a God of redemption, a God of release, and one that really, in a sense, never leaves you alone. I could never have done any of this work without a father and a mother who made sure that I was in church school, who made sure that I was growing up in the faith, and the mother who right now at 97 years old and who lives with me and lives with my wife, who always reminds me that I am her son, I am her child. It is nothing more embarrassing sometimes than to preach the sermon. And everyone comes through the door saying, "Good sermon, Dr. Nelson." And my mother, through her tears, breaks through the crowd and said, "My baby Herbie, it is something else." So no matter how many of these awards I get, there's always a place of humility. And there's always one to remind me. But I could not have done this without a loving wife who has tolerated about half of 15 months, I should say 15 days, out of a month of traveling on the road over the last 4 years. A daughter in college who challenges me to be a man every day and challenges me to grow up along with her as she goes through her college years. And remembering it all, that the challenges that we face in this society today continue. We right now are facing some very difficult and turbulent times, and I wish I could stand here before you and not have to work, but I do have to work tonight. We're facing times where the middle class, who so many politicians talk about, are somewhere between middle class and poverty, a category we have not yet defined. So many seniors who are afraid of losing Medicaid, the disability community that's struggling with the same issues of losing Medicaid. We're in the midst of seniors who, on their recline and shine money, are now taking care of their grown children who are living in the same community, the same house, but their income has changed or they're working part-time. And so that money that they have earned all of their life in living to gain and one day sit back and relax and enjoy is now paying the mortgage in those children's home, and that monthly note is more than some of those parents pay for their entire house. We're dealing with children who go to school and who cannot bring books home. We're dealing with children who are in impoverished schools who do not have enough computers, that are not set up for this modern technology and this technological age. We're dealing with children who are walking past their mother who has the third man in the house, who is hitting the crack pipe on the way to catch the bus and taking their other two siblings to get them to school and managing life almost as adults, and yet they're children. And yet amid it all, we look to a place called Washington, D.C., that is sitting down in January trying to figure out who's going to sit next to each other when it's time for the State of the Union address, with 4 different seating charts being passed around. A place called Washington, D.C., where everyone wants your vote. And they kiss babies and they shake hands, and they come back and break ground, and they go to the appropriate funerals. But at the end of the day, will not do anything about gun violence, where 30,000 people a year killed in the United States of America by guns. And from 1979 to 1997, more people have been killed in the United States by guns than in every foreign war the United States has ever fought since the beginning of this country. It is safer to live on the battleground outside of this country than it is to live in the streets of the United States or to live in the United States. I'm suggesting tonight, yes, I feel good, and I thank you for what you're bestowing upon me. But my work is not finished, nor is yours. The reality is that today, more than ever, we are seeing voter repression at every level. Our country has been co-opted by the corporatization of the United States government and our politicians. They're on the take for campaign money. Campaign finance is out of the window. And at the end of the day, we are finding that when there's a choice between doing what we've asked them to do in an election and what corporations have asked them to do, we find that they side with corporations every time. And let's not stop there. I wish I could. But the Supreme Court is dealing with issues now encroaching on religious liberty. And there is something in that for the Church of Jesus Christ to, yes, fear in one sense, but also stand up in another. And yes, we must also remember that we stand in this institution, and this is what Katherine Johnson reminded me of. We stand in this institution not simply for an academic degree, but to come to the profound theological depth of understanding of what Jesus Christ was willing to give for us, and does not expect any less from us than what he was willing to give, our lives for the sake of God and the world, our lives for the sake of transformation and the ordering of the new day, not forgetting from whence we came, but remembering that we have a ways to go. If we're willing to grow up in faith, we can be changed. And so tonight, I think the challenge is for this not to be a stepping down, but a rising up. Not a deep sleep, but a great awakening for both recipients and those who are here for this weekend. It's a time to remember that there is work to be done on the battlefield of faith and of life, and that the power that God has given to each and every one of us is to deepen our theological reflection and to put some feet on our prayers and to do what the Lord requires to make a difference in this day and age. The Lord's not finished with me, and the Lord is not finished with you either. Therefore, stand fast in the liberty where Jesus Christ has set us free. Thank you, and thanks be to God.
J. Herbert, that reminds me of why we call it commencement at the end of a seminary career. Our closing prayer this evening is from Thomas Merton. And I'd like to ask us to rise together for this prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
We do not exist for ourselves alone. And it is only when we are fully convinced of this fact that we begin to love ourselves properly and thus also love others properly. What do we mean by loving ourselves properly? We mean desiring to live, accepting life as a very great gift from you, God, and a very great good. Not because of what it gives us, but because of what it enables us to give to others. And now we pray that you would give us the strength, the love, and the imagination to give that life to others. Amen. Thank you all, friends.